from buddies. A familiar anger flared in him. "You're wealthy, probably well-educated," he said. "Juliana Academy, perhaps." Juliana's was considered the best place for blue-blood girls with money to receive their education. He had become very familiar with Adrianglian school selection for lark's sake. He shouldn't have bothered. His niece shot down all his careful choices. "Winter's college," Charlotte said. "Her tunic perfectly matches the shade of her eyes. Juliana's encourages more creativity." The woman arched an eyebrow and looked Charlotte over, pausing on her dirty, blood-stained clothes. His urge to injure her shot into overdrive. "And where did you study, if I may ask?" "I had personal tutorship from one of the first 10, Charlotte said, her voice glacially cold and cutting with scorn, like a knife. "Don't try to belittle me. You're hopelessly outclassed. I see shortcomings in your every single aspect, from your lack of taste to your rotten morality. You've involved yourself in the basest of crimes. You facilitated murder, rape, and the torture of children. Your conduct is unbecoming a peer of realm." He almost winced. The woman drew back, her cheeks turning red. "Please, spare me the rhetoric. We're a higher breed. You know this as well as I do. You simply put on blinders and call it altruism. I call it willful ignorance. Those of us who are blue blood became so because our ancestors rose from the ranks of unwashed mobs. They were the thanes, the chiefs, the leaders of their people. The betters of the rest by virtue of their abilities and will. We're their descendants. They climbed to power and we maintain it. It's that simple. These people you're accusing me of crimes against live like animals. In many cases, being stripped of their freedom is the best thing that ever happened to them." Charlotte stared at her. "The function of a noble title is to serve the people. 7 blocks from here, there's a body of a boy whose eyes have been gouged out with his mouth sewn shut. He was still alive when they did it. What is wrong with you? Are you human at all?" "A regrettable but necessary casualty." The bookkeeper crossed her thin arms on her chest. "But you are right. Perhaps we should have left him with his lovely family to live in squalor, while his parents drank themselves senseless in an effort to forget their own laziness, and beat him when his existence reminded them of their baseness. Those who are capable act. They amount to something in life. They don't live in filth, gorging themselves on cheap food, drowning in addictions, and rutting to produce yet more of their ilk. We rescue children from that. We provide a valuable service." "Unbelievable." Charlotte made a choking noise. "Your condemnation means nothing," the bookkeeper said. "This enterprise was conceived by a mind far superior to yours or mine. Think about it. When a blue blood buys a pretty young girl, she has a shot at a better life. If she's smart, she will elevate herself by having his child. Just the other day, we fulfilled a special order for a childless couple. They wanted a pair of twins, a boy and a girl, between the ages of 2 and 4, resembling both of them. Do you have any idea how difficult it was to find suitable children? Yet we've managed. Slavery is an opportunity. It's regrettable you can't understand that." Nothing either Charlotte or Richard could say would ever make this woman see reason. "Kill her," Charlotte said. "If you don't kill her now, I'll do it myself. We need her testimony and information." He approached the table. He had no idea how they would make it down the hill and to the port with a captive, but by gods he would try. "Killing me won't be necessary." The woman raised her chin. "Unlike you, I know my duty to the spear." She grasped her pendant. Richard lunged to stop her. The stone crunched under the pressure of her fingers. A blinding spike of light shot out into her chin, through her head, and out of her skull. Charlotte gasped. The bookkeeper sagged in a chair, dead, her head drooping to the side. The whole thing took less than a second. She had been wearing an owner's gift necklace. He should have seen it. Gods damn it. The world screeched to a halt. He felt like he was falling. All this time, all this work, and the arrogant scum killed herself. Was there no justice in the world? Maybe Charlotte— He pivoted to her. Very dead, she said, her face disgusted. Irreversibly dead. Damn it! His mind whirred, trying to reassess the situation. Wallowing in defeat never served any purpose. No, he was kidding himself. Even if they had managed to take her alive, neither of them could have gotten her to the ship in their present condition, and if they did, by some miracle, manage it, she would never testify. But it wasn't over, he reminded himself. Not yet. They might not have the bookkeeper alive, but they still had her office and everything within it. Duty to the spear. Only one spear came to mind. Gaysum, he thought out loud, the symbol of the Adrianglian royal family. That would explain her devotion, Charlotte said. If she thought she was serving the crown in some capacity, she couldn't permit herself to acknowledge that they could do something base, or her entire worldview would come crashing down. They looked at each other. In Adrianglia, the crown was revered. The power of the royal bloodline had its limitations, but the monarch still held the presiding position over the council, wielding much of the power within the executive branch. The royal family was looked upon as the epitome of behavior and personal honor. The idea that the crown could be involved in the slave trade was unthinkable. There has to be a trail somewhere. She was a bookkeeper. She had to have kept financial records. Richard strode to the shelves and pulled a stack of books out. He handed them to Charlotte. She leafed through them while he rummaged through the desk. His search of the drawers turned up a wooden box, unlocked. Inside, necklaces lay in a row, each with a simple, large gemstone in a variety of colors. Unlike the bookkeeper's pendant, their chains were short. Once fastened around the neck, they couldn't be removed by slipping them over the head. "Is that what she used to kill herself?" Charlotte asked, her voice dry. He nodded. "They're called owner's gifts." He picked one up, dangling the false ruby pendant. "They're given to young attractive slaves who are used for sexual gratification. They have a one-time lock. Once fastened, they're impossible to take off without cutting through the chain. Each contains a small magic charge designed to kill the wearer. The necklace detonates if the chain is cut or the stone is damaged. A pointed reminder that if you disobey or displease, your life can end in an instant. They work much better than shackles and are a lot less obvious." She clenched her teeth, and he read a mix of horror and disgust in her face. "Every time I think I've reached the limit, this place shocks me." And that was true, Richard realized. He thought she'd grow callous or numb, but every new evidence of cruelty cut a new wound into her. Again, he wished he hadn't brought her here. There were only so many wounds one could take. "What do you make of this?" Charlotte showed him a hollowed-out book. Hope stirred in him. Was there anything inside? No. And the newborn hope plummeted to its death. "We have to keep looking." 20 minutes later, they looked at each other across the table. The office was a wreck. They had left nothing untouched. The ledgers, if they existed, eluded them. Richard braced himself on the table. He felt another bout of dizziness coming on. He'd gotten through the first one a few minutes ago, but now the vertigo was back. Taking wounds came with a price. "Richard," Charlotte said. He turned. A bloody figure stood in the doorway, his hair and clothes stained with gore and soot. His eyes were tired, and he was carrying a bloody crowbar. A huge black dog panted by his side. "Jack?" Richard said. "Hi." Jack dropped the crowbar. It clanged on the floor. "How are you?" Charlotte asked. "Good," he said, his voice dull. "I'm all funned out. I think we should go to the ship now. The city is burning, the fire's coming this way, and the smoke is making my throat itch." We can't leave yet, Charlotte sighed. We've looked everywhere, but we haven't found the ledgers. We have to find them, or all this was for nothing. Did you look in this safe? Jack asked. What safe? The room had no safe, only a table and the shelves, and he had knocked on all the clear walls looking for a hollow spot. In the fireplace. Richard turned to the fireplace. It was a typical, weird limestone fireplace without a mantel. No fire was laid out, and the fire pit was perfectly clean. No soot marks. It definitely hadn't been used, but this far south it might have been conceived as decorative. Richard moved to it, probing the stones with his hand. What makes you think there's a safe in it? Jack sat by Charlotte on the floor. There's no chimney. It smells like the dead woman's perfume. I can scent it from here. Also, there's a doorstop. Where? Charlotte asked, brushing debris from Jack's hair. Jack pointed to the ground. A small, ornate doorstop, designed to be slid under a door, sat by the desk. If the front of the fireplace swung open like a door, it was in the perfect position to be grabbed and wedged under it. There was no reason for the bookkeeper to spend time at the fireplace. She wouldn't have gone anywhere near it. Richard knocked at the stones. If there was some mechanism to unlock it, he couldn't see it. He picked up his sword. Maybe there is a hidden switch, Charlotte said. It would take too long. He concentrated, feeding magic into the blade, forcing it toward the tip of the sword. The flash-coated edge glowed brighter and brighter until it blazed like a tiny star. Richard raised the sword and forced the tip into the limestone, testing it. The blade sank into the fireplace, cutting through the rock with surprising ease. No more than half an inch, he decided. If there was a safe, he didn't want to damage the contents. He dropped to one knee, slashed horizontally across the fireplace, rose, and slashed again at his eye level. The front of the fireplace slid half an inch. Richard stepped back. The cut section crashed down and fell with a loud thud, its back exposed. Wooden boards with a thin layer of limestone affixed to its front. Inside the gutted fireplace, shelves gaped, containing 5 small black books and 1 red one. He turned to Jack. Well done! You're a genius! Charlotte hugged the boy. Richard pulled out the books and brought them over to Charlotte. His hands shook. She opened the first black book, and her eyes widened as she read. He flipped through the red volume, scanning the pages filled with neat rows of accounting figures. Investments and payments to and from 5 names. Here they were. The people directly profiting from the sale of human beings. Lord Cassid, a rich blue blood who had made his money in the import and export trade. He had seen him once at Declan's house during a formal dinner. Lady Ermine. He had no idea who she was, but he would find out. Baron René, another unfamiliar name. Lord Madoc, a retired general, a decorated war hero. And Viscount Robert Brennan. The king's cousin? Charlotte asked. Richard nodded. So it was true. The bookkeeper truly served the spear. Robert Brennan, the 7th person in line for the throne. Never in his calculations had he ever thought that the chain of command went that high. You're shocked, Charlotte said. I don't understand. Richard leaned against the desk. He was born wearing a silk shirt. He has wealth, status, the privilege afforded to his bloodline, the best education one can buy. All the things that had been denied to Richard. And education was a double-edged sword. It broadened his horizons, and, at the same time, it made him painfully aware of the opportunities he would never have. There was a time when he felt trapped in the mire, aware of the world outside the edge, but unable to get to it, chained to the swamp. He had neither the breeding, nor the money, nor the opportunity to make it past the Louisiana troops guarding the border with the edge. But he had the intellect and the education to understand the full futility of his position. He would have killed to open just one door and escape. Brennan had all the advantages, Every door was open to him. Why? Why do this? He's like a millionaire who's robbing beggars. Who knows? Charlotte said. Maybe it's the thrill of doing something criminal. She sounded exhausted. Worry stabbed at him. He had to get her and the boy out of here. He cut a section of the gauzy curtain, stacked the books on it, and tied it into a makeshift bag. Stealing was criminal. This was an atrocity. More so because Brennan, born into privilege, had a duty. He had a responsibility to wield his influence for the benefit of the realm, and instead he spat on it. Whatever sickness drove Brennan to rule over the slave trade, Richard would make sure he paid. He would make certain. He had promised it to Sophie, and he would see it through. Richard sheathed his sword and handed the bag of books to Jack. This is vitally important. Guard it. The boy nodded. Richard offered Charlotte his right hand. She rose from the chair, swaying a little. They walked downstairs and out of the front door. Below them, the city stretched down the hill to the harbor. Orange flames billowed from two different sides of the town, far to the left and closer to the right, devouring the structures. Here and there, isolated shots rang out, followed by screams. A single ship waited in the middle of the harbor, like a graceful bird on a sea of black glass, and above it all, in the endless night sky, a pale moon rose, spilling its indifferent light onto the scene. Richard turned to the left, behind the house. The horse still waited. He untied the reins and brought it over to Charlotte. "I can walk." Charlotte. He hadn't meant to put all of his frustration into that one single word, but somehow he did. She blinked, startled. "Please, get on the horse." She climbed into the saddle. He took the reins and started down the street, Jack at his side. The dog took position ahead of them. Richard's face itched mercilessly. As soon as they got down to the coast, he would wash all the gunk of his disguise off his skin. "George has been alone with Dad for a long time," Jack said. It was a lot to ask, but he had confidence in George, and the boy needed to redeem himself. "He will be fine." "Are you going to kill our dad?" the boy asked quietly. "It's not for me to decide what to do with your father." John Drayton deserved to die, and if Drayton weren't connected to the boys, he would dispose of the man like the piece of garbage he was. But family took precedence, and the children's claim superseded his. "If you're going to let us handle it, don't let George do it," Jack said. "I'll kill him for Grandma. I don't care. I don't even remember him. But George waited for him all this time. It would be bad for him." It was said that changelings didn't understand human emotion. They understood it just fine, Richard reflected. They simply couldn't figure out why others chose to mask what they truly felt. Jack wanted to spare his brother. Even in the mire, where things like betrayal and punishment were kept in the family, no child was expected to kill his parent. The boy, no, the young man, was looking at him. "Don't worry," he told Jack. "That's one burden neither of you will have to carry." 9. "You look good," John Drayton said from the opposite end of his cabin. "Solid. All grown up. I remember when you were sickly. You kept raising animals because you couldn't stand to watch something die. I take it you've gotten over that." George examined the man in front of him. The key was to cordon off his own anger and evaluate him as he would any other opponent. The years had banged John around, but he was in good health. He ate well and carried a few extra pounds. The air in the cabin hinted at the spicy notes of his cologne. His clothes were well cut from good fabric. His hair was professionally shorn to flatter his face. John Drayton was a vain man, and he liked spending money on himself. George remembered him as being big, a tall shadow. He remembered him being funny. He would make jokes. The thought spurred the vicious part of him into a gallop. Jokes. Right. For the first hour and a half, John had kept his mouth shut, probably waiting for him to talk, waiting for, "How could you abandon us, Father?" and, "I've waited for you to come back, Father," waiting for some tell, some clue or lever to push. Keep waiting, scumbag. Most people didn't handle silence well, and John had banked on it, and lost. George had no problem with silence. It was an effective tool, and he'd seen his mirror handlers use it to great effect. Having finally realized that no clues would be coming, John decided to start talking and probe for weaknesses. George had sat in on enough of the mirror's interrogations to guess the most likely course this conversation would take. John would try to bridge the gap between the 6-year-old sickly child he left behind and the 16-year-old he saw now. "You remember what I told you when I left?" Like an open book. "I said, 'You mind the family, Georgie. Keep an eye on your sister and brother for me.' For you to keep an eye on your sister and brother for me. You've done good. Jack's still alive. That's something. Couldn't have been easy to make that miracle happen." "What do you know about it? What do you know about Jack, about his rages, about his not understanding how people think, about Rose spending hours to coax him back to humanity? What do you know, you slimy weasel? You know nothing of our family. You chose to know nothing." "How's Rose?" "Where were you when she worked herself into the ground? Oh, that's right, getting rich from misery, rape, and pain." "You afraid to speak to me, George?" John slapped his palm on the desk. "Damn it, boy. Tell me how my daughter is." George moved Linda a step closer. "Do that again, and I'll let her gnaw on your neck, slowly, one bite at a time. Rose will be delighted when I bring her your head." John leaned back. Fear shot through his eyes. He hit it fast, but George had seen it. Yes, he knew the type. John would do anything, say anything to avoid physical pain and punishment. He feared being held accountable more than anything. "You wouldn't do that," John said. "Not the Georgie I remember. The Georgie I remember was kind." "The Georgie you remember had a father." Ugh! He knew he shouldn't have responded to the bait. Too late now. John's face brightened. "You still have one. Look, I know I haven't done right by you kids, and it's not like I set out to haul slaves for a living. I just kind of fell into it." "Do tell. How does one fall into slavery?" "The same way one falls into anything." John spread his arms. He was becoming more animated, happy he'd found some common ground. "You're hard up for cash, and one day in port a man asks you if you want to make some easy money. Easy breezy. No need to worry about paltry things like honor, integrity, and sleeping well at night. That's the only kind of money you were ever interested in, isn't it? The easy money. Hey, I work hard just like anybody else. I just had a stretch of hard luck there for a while." John leaned forward. "Georgie, listen to me. Whatever else happens, I'm still your father. I've done pretty well for myself here, and I wanted to come and find you guys. I kept thinking, just do one more run, get a little bit more money, then I'll split. But I'm in a good place now, and I'm sick of these slaver assholes. We can take off, you know, you and me. I can show you the ropes, bring you into the family business. I'm a good sailor, Georgie. Let me tell you, when you go out on the ocean and leave the shore behind, it's something. Just water everywhere, sapphire blue for miles and miles. Water, wind, and sky. You can taste the freedom. There is adventure there. Mystery." He was good. "What about Jack?" John shrugged. "What about him? Jack's a good kid. Didn't go nuts like his people do." "His people?" John leaned closer. Oh, come on, Georgie. We all know it. Rose is mine, you're mine, but Jack was never mine. For him to be what he is, one of his parents had to be a changeling, and there ain't no changelings in my family or your mother's. I checked. My father wasn't one. My mother isn't one. George fought against grinding his teeth. Their parents weren't changelings, and on your mother's side, nobody was one for 3 generations back either. Your mother. She wasn't a bad woman, but she was troubled. You think it was easy, knowing she opened her legs to every bastard that came through town? It hurt me. Really hurt me. But I've come to terms with it, and so should you. You always looked out for Jack. Rose and your grandma, they put that burden on you, and I never thought it was fair. Everyone deserves a break, Georgie. Everyone. Come with me. Jack can look after himself, and later, when you're older and I'm ready to retire, you can take over. This ship isn't just named after me. It's named after you, too. No, it isn't. He looked into John's eyes and saw a cold calculation there. In that moment, George realized he would be dead the moment they left land behind. They'd find what was left of him later, bobbing on the waves with his throat slit and his body torn by fish. My own father. Thank you, but I already have a career. What sort of a career is that? John pointedly looked over his rags. If you've got one, it doesn't pay too well by the looks of it. No offense to you, boy, but you can do better. Or are you talking about those bandits over there? That's no good. We picked you up near Kalena. That means it's either the Rook, the families, or Jason Paris, and it has to be Paris because the families know better, and Rook likes running his show personally, and I haven't seen him. Am I right? I am right. Paris is a ravenous shark. That's what he is, cutthroat. Can you take a man's life, Georgie? You think about that, because you've got to be a cold, calculating killer to be in his company. I'm not with Jason Paris. George leaned back. Who are you with, then? George reached inside his sleeve, peeled off the coin he kept taped on his forearm, and tossed it to him. I'm with the people who fish for ravenous sharks. John caught the coin. The magic charge bit his fingers with tiny sparks. He flinched. The surface of the coin flowed, turning into a miniature mirror. Every agent of the mirror carried one. Some wore rings, some had earrings, and some embedded it into a knife's hilt. He had chosen a coin. It seemed appropriate. John stared at his own reflection. Blood drained from his face. John dropped the coin like it was hot. I'm an underagent of the 3rd degree, Father. I started when I was 14. My mission count is at 12. 10 successes and 2 aborts. My kill count is at 7, and I'm very good with a rapier. In 2 years, when I complete my training, I'll be the youngest full-fledged agent in the Mirror's recent history. Coincidentally, in 2 more years, I'll also graduate from Brassel's Academy, since I've taken their entrance exams and passed them with a perfect score. There is a place for me waiting in the diplomatic corps. John Drayton stared at him, his face slack with shock. So you see, Father, if I ever feel the need to play at being a sailor, a vessel will either be provided for me or I'll purchase one. Given that my name is now George Camarine, and the Duke of the Southern Provinces thinks of me as his grandson, I can afford an entire fleet. A small one, but it will be sufficient. George smiled, a controlled baring of teeth. I've already accomplished more in my life than you could ever hope to achieve. Your promises of a grandiose smuggler life hold no attraction to me, so do be quiet, Father. I'm fighting a strong urge to kill you, and I'd hate to slip up and do you in before Jack comes back. Knuckles rapped on the door. Enter, George said. The door swung open. Richard shouldered his way in, favoring his left side. His left arm rested in a sling. He had washed off his disguise and looked like himself. Jack followed, supporting Charlotte. She, on the other hand, looked like a shadow of her former self, pale, exhausted, and sickly. "Did you run into trouble?" George asked. "Some," Richard said. "Any problems?" "None. Just talking to the dead man." John licked his lips. "What have I ever done to you that you hate me so much?" "The crew you were supposed to be meeting by Kalena was chasing me," Richard said. "I'm the hunter." John drew back. "I ended up at your mother's house," Richard said. "We're distantly related by marriage, and she recognized me and tried to help me." "Grandmother is dead," Jack said. "The slavers burned our house. You killed Grandma, Dad." John's hands shook. He swallowed. "I wasn't there." "Oh, no, you don't get to weasel your way out of this one." "Not directly, but you made it possible," George said. "You contributed." John dragged his hand over his face and through his hair. Richard took a piece of paper off the desk, wrote something on it, and pushed it across the desk to John. 5 names. What do you know?" John looked at the list. His voice lost all emotion. "They're called the Council. That's where the real money goes. Madoc is the muscle. He supplies the slavers. Kassid is the main investor. I don't know what the other two do. Brennan runs the whole show. That's all I've got. I'm low on the ladder. If you expect me to testify, I won't. I'll never make it. Brennan will have my throat slit before I ever get a word out. And even if I did, it's all rumors. I've never met any of them. We never talked. I follow the schedule, pick up slaves, bring them here, and get paid. That's the end of it." "I'm done with him." Richard turned to him. "He's yours." Finally, he rose. "George," Charlotte said softly. He turned to her. "Think about what you're about to do. He is your father. Think about the cost." She glanced past him. "Think about the guilt." It dawned on him. Jack. Jack always wanted their father to return. When they were small, he used to sit in a tree watching the road, waiting for him to come back. In elementary school, in the Broken, Jack would fight anyone who dared to say anything bad about their dad, and he would beat them bloody. George had no problem with his hands being bloody, and neither did Jack in the heat of the moment, but he might regret it later. Jack tended to brood, and sometimes his brooding took him to dark places. He was only 14. John Drayton had to die. He had to pay the price for the inhumanities he helped commit, but George couldn't let John's death ruin his brother. The scumbag wasn't worth a single minute of Jack's self-loathing. "You're right," George said. "It's not worth it. We'll get a boat, take him to the mainland, and have him put away. You'll be in prison for so long, you'll forget what the sun looks like." "Do what the boy says," Richard said. John rose. "Right." He reached out to ruffle Jack's hair. Jack pulled back, avoiding the touch. John dropped his hand. "Right." They went out, Richard first, then John and George, with Linda in tow. Jack was the last. Outside, the stench of smoke assaulted George's nostrils. The island town burned, the orange glow of its fire reflecting in the waters of the harbor. A cleansing fire, George decided, and a warning. Richard had unleashed Jason Paris on the island like a tornado. The news of the market's burning would carry, and soon every slaver along the eastern seaboard would know he wasn't invincible, and his paycheck wasn't safe. It was a brilliant move. Richard was a born tactician. George would have to remember that. The cabin door swung open behind him. Jack emerged. Richard stepped closer to him. "I need you to watch Charlotte for me. She overspent herself." "Why me?" Jack asked. Because Jason's crew is full of bad men, and she's alone and vulnerable. Jack glanced first at Richard, then at George. He wasn't quite buying it. Can you just do one thing without arguing? George tossed his hair back. Just do it. You do it. You owe me for the canal. Jack growled something under his breath. Don't worry, Richard said. I haven't forgotten. Forgotten what? Jack shrugged and went into the cabin. Into the boat. Richard pointed to a small barge waiting by the side of the vessel. They must have used it to come aboard. They got into the barge, Richard at the nose, then John Drayton. George sent Linda in next, added insurance. Everyone sat. George took a seat at the stern, passed his hand over the motor, starting the magic chain reaction, and the boat sped across the harbor to the shore. Midway through it, George let go of Linda. She pitched into the waves, softly, and sank into the cool, soothing depths to finally rest. He didn't need her any more. Half a minute later, the boat plowed into the soft sand of the beach. The two men stepped out. He followed. Still protecting your brother, John said. The frustration he had been holding in finally broke free. Shut up! You don't know him. Don't talk about him. Because of you, ma mère is dead. It's good that she's dead, because if she knew what you've become, it would kill her. John inhaled. Fine, let's get this over with. Richard pulled out his sword. He's my responsibility, George said. My family and my shame. John winced. Richard held out his blade. George took it. The lean, razor-sharp sword felt so heavy. The hilt was cold. He concentrated, channeling his magic like a current of molten metal from his arm into his fingers, into the sword, and finally letting it stretch across the edge. The blade sparked with white. He had trained for months to learn how to do it, but now the magic coated the steel as if on its own. He couldn't bring himself to raise the sword. George was trapped between guilt and duty. The indecision hurt. Deciding hurt more. And he was so monumentally angry at his father for making him choose. Was he really that weak? C'est la différence entre lui et toi. Richard switched to the language of Louisiana. This is the difference between you and him. If you raise that sword, you're letting his actions determine yours. Richard continued in Gaulish. You're simply reacting to what he has already done. We are forever linked with those we kill. If you end his life, you will drag his corpse with you for the rest of yours. When your brother and sister look at you, they will see the killer of their father. When you look in the mirror, you will see a murderer. Had he lived with you and abused you, or those close to you, ending his life might be cathartic, a sign of rebirth. But this man is a stranger to you. You barely know him. There is no empowerment in his death by your hand. He has no right to govern your life. Let your own actions define who you are. He was right. Killing John Drayton simply wasn't worth it. If he forced himself to do it, he would regret it. It would eat at him, and why should he sentence himself to the same burden he tried to spare Jack? George swallowed and slowly lowered his sword. Can't do it, huh? John smiled. I'm still your father, boy. The very fact that he was goading him meant killing him would be a bad idea. No, George said. You're not. You're just some swine that slept with my mother and ran off. Richard pulled a gun from inside his clothes. It was a firearm from the Broken, a large, heavy hunk of metal. He flipped it and offered it to John, but first, you're free to go. Use it to protect yourself. What? John Drayton had killed, tortured, and raped. If set free, he'd sell them out the first chance he got. He'd go on stealing, hurting, and profiting from other people's misery. It had to end, here and now, so he would never darken his brother's or Rose's horizon. George turned to Richard. Trust me, Richard said. It's the right thing. John hefted the gun in his hand, taking a couple of steps back. Loaded. 6 bullets, Richard said. More than enough. John raised the gun. George stared down the black barrel as big as a cannon. Everything around him stopped. The world gained a crystal clarity, and George saw everything in minute detail. The individual leaves of the palm behind his father, the bead of sweat on John's temple, the tiny red veins in his father's eyes. The sound of the safety being released rocked George like the blow of a giant hammer against his skull. He knew the bullet would hit him between the eyes. He was staring death in the face. "You're an idiot," John said to Richard. "He's your son," Richard said. His voice was calm, so calm. He should do something, George realized. He should... "Yeah, about that." John grimaced. "Sorry, boy. I never thought you were mine either." John squeezed the trigger. A bolt of white tore out of the gun and bit deep into John's chest. He convulsed soundlessly, like a marionette jerking on invisible strings, and fell into the sand. George felt the moment his body crossed the threshold between life and death and into his domain. "It's done, ma mère. It's done. He won't hurt anyone else." The relief washed over him, replaced instantly by shame. "How?" "An owner's gift necklace," Richard said. "I loaded a stone into the chamber instead of a bullet. When he tried to fire, the stone shattered and released its magic." "And if he had walked away?" "I would have stopped him and taken the stone out." George couldn't tell if it was a convenient lie for his sake or the truth. The terrible thing was, he didn't even care. He was simply relieved that John Drayton was a corpse. What does that say about me? Richard clamped his arm around him. "He died the way he lived. That's the kind of man he was." "I waited for him." George barely recognized the hoarse, dull sound as his own voice. "I waited for him for years. When Rose was working a crappy job in the Broken, I'd sit on the porch, waiting for her to come home and pretend I saw him walking up to the house. He would come up with a big smile and tell me, 'George, come sailing with me. We'll look for treasure together.'" His eyes watered. He forced the tears back. "He tried to get me to abandon my own brother. He tried to kill me. I looked into his eyes. They were cold like a shark's. He wanted to cry and scream like a child." "None of what he did or what he had become is your responsibility," Richard said. "He was a grown man, and he's responsible for his own sins. Everything he did in his life led him to this point. I knew he would pull the trigger. It was as inevitable as the sunrise." George stared at him. "I should have done it. I should have ended it. Him. You feel that way in the heat of the moment because you look at your father and you see the legacy of his crimes. It brings you deep shame. You want to wipe it clean and right the wrongs. But killing him wouldn't undo them," Richard said. "My youngest brother betrayed our family, and our relatives died because of it. His cousins, his nieces, nephews, children, people who loved him and cared for him. He broke bread with us. He shared in our sorrow and happiness. Then he betrayed us. He was a deeply selfish human being. He watched our father being murdered. He was hurt, and he wanted revenge. That was all that mattered to him. I looked into his eyes when he told me he had done it deliberately, and it was like looking into the soul of a stranger." "What happened to him?" For some reason, the answer seemed vitally important. "We forced him to walk with us into the final battle. I saw him on the battlefield. I thought it was my fault, because he was my brother, and he had put the family at risk. But I've realized he made his own choices. I could have killed him, but I chose to walk away. I've ended a lot of lives, but I'm relieved I didn't take his. He wasn't among the dead when we were done." So he's still out there somewhere. Richard bent to look into George's eyes. Your father made his own destiny, and the weight of it crushed him. He was fated to die here by his own hand. No regrets, George. No guilt, no shame. Leave it here on this beach. If you carry it, it will poison you. Come, we must get back to the ship. Richard led him back into the boat. They sped across the harbor, back to the ship. George stared at the water. He hurt, and he cradled that knot of pain in the pit of his stomach and tried to grow a callus over the wound. Richard stepped onto the deck of the ship. Ahead of him, George ducked into the cabin. Richard turned and looked at the inferno claiming the island. Orange flames raged, sending plumes of greasy black smoke into the sky. Distant screams echoed, some of fury, some of pain. A ship sank slowly to the left, the lone vessel that had attempted to escape the slaughter. Jason's cannons had fired a single shot from the fort, and the glancing blow had crippled the stately yacht. The magic-operated pumps had managed to keep it afloat, but they were slowly losing the battle, and now the elegant vessel careened, serving as a warning to anyone else contemplating a quick escape. This is what hell must look like. A small flotilla of boats departed from the docks and sped across the water, their magic-fueled motors leaving pale trails of luminescence in their wake. Jason's crew was coming back. The door of the cabin swung open behind him. "Richard!" He turned. Charlotte marched at him, buoyed by anger, the outrage so plain on her face she nearly glowed. She had drained all of her reserves on the island. She couldn't have recovered in the scant 15 minutes it took them to ride to the beach and back. Worry squirmed through him. If she wasn't careful, the exertion would kill her. "Did you let that child kill his father?" He marveled at her fury. "Answer me, you heartless bastard!" This place, this hell on earth, should have broken her. Charlotte should have given up by now, beaten down by the horrors and fatigue. But she must have seen the pain in George, and it propelled her to confront him. She would never compromise herself, Richard realized. She would never become jaded or lose her resolve. No matter how many dead bodies she walked by, it would always bother her. She had the nobility of spirit to which he aspired, and which he so sorely lacked. She wasn't naive or blind. She simply chose to do what was right, no matter the personal cost. He wanted this woman more than he had wanted anything in his entire world. Life with her would never be easy, but he would be proud of it. He wanted her so much it almost hurt. In his mind, the ship split. She on one end of a chasm, he on the other. Between lay all the things he had done and she had seen him do. They had too much to overcome. It would never happen. When all was said and done, she wouldn't want a hardened killer with blood on his hands. She would want someone who'd make her forget this hell. "Richard, don't just stand there. I deserve an answer." "John Drayton took his own life," he said. "George had no part in his death. He did witness it. It was good for him. It brought things to a conclusion." She looked at him for a long moment, her gray eyes bright, almost silver. Maybe there was some chance of something. "I'm a heartless bastard," he told her, wishing he could close the distance between them. "But even I wouldn't let a child murder his own father. Is that how you see me? Am I a complete monster in your eyes, Charlotte?" She turned and walked away. He closed his eyes, inhaling the smoke from the funeral pyre that was the Isle of Divine Nah. Well, there it was. He had his confirmation. She would be free of him soon. They had the ledgers. It would all be over in a matter of days. "Richard!" Charlotte called. He turned. She stood by the cabin. "You're not a monster. You're the most noble man I've ever met, in every sense of the word. I wish—" His pulse sped up. Jason Paris bounded onto the deck. "Am I interrupting something?" Charlotte closed her mouth. Gods damn him. He would strangle that moron and throw his lifeless body overboard. "Yes," Paris grinned. "Well, too bad. We need to haul ass out of here." Jason's crew flooded the ship, lowering the nets to haul up bags of plundered goods. "If I had 50 extra men, I could own this island." Jason swept the burning city with his hand. "I'd make it into my own Tortuga." A pirate port of the Broken. He'd read about it in books. Adrianglia would hardly tolerate Tortuga so close to its shores. What are you planning to do when the Adrianglian Navy blockades the island and starts pounding it with carriage-sized magic missiles? "Duck in cover?" Jason flashed his teeth. "What happened to your arm, old man? Did the mighty hunter actually get hurt this time?" Charlotte's knees folded, and she slid along the cabin's wall to the deck. He shoved Jason out of the way, cleared the distance between them, and dropped to his knees. "Charlotte." She looked at him, her eyes clear. "Well, this is embarrassing." "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she said. "Mortified, but fine. I shouldn't have marched out here. I've overextended myself. I don't think it's anything life-threatening, but I'm probably going to lose consciousness. Please don't leave me here on the deck." "I won't." He wrapped his right arm around her. She leaned against him, her forehead resting against his cheek. He couldn't believe he was touching her. "I promise." "Look at the two of you," Jason said above him. "You're a sorry-looking mess. Maybe after this you should plan something less tiring. A tea party or a book club or whatever you senior citizens do in your spare time. Look at me. 6 men dead, the city looted, and I'm good. Look at my crew. Are y'all tired?" "No!" a dozen people roared. "See? Fresh as daisies." Richard growled low in his throat. "One day—" Charlotte caressed his cheek. Her lips brushed his, and he forgot where he was or what he was doing. "Thank you," she said. He held still for a full minute before he finally realized that she had drifted off into sleep. When Charlotte awoke, she was lying on a cushioned seat under a blanket. Around her, the polished walls of the horseless phaeton glowed in the sunlight filtering through the gauzy curtain. Sealed behind smooth, transparent pseudo-resin, the structure of the phaeton consisted of gears and delicate metalwork, with glowing, hair-thin threads of magic running through it all. Faint lights of warm amber and green magic slid along the threads once in a while, melting into the metalwork, like man-made will-o'-the-wisps. Drowsy and comfortable on the soft seat, she watched the soothing interplay of magic and metal. It occurred to her that she had no idea how the phaeton actually worked. She had ridden in them 100 times, and never thought to find out. Someone was watching her. Charlotte turned her head. Across from her, Richard sat in the contoured seat. He still wore the same clothes, smelling of smoke. His hair was a mess. His arm rested in a sling. He was ridiculously handsome, and his dark eyes were warm, almost inviting. Last night was a blur. She remembered being so tired, waiting for Richard and George to return. George's story made no sense, and she chased Richard on the deck and demanded to know if he let George kill his own father. Her mind boggled at the idea that he would force the child to live with that kind of guilt. It would scar George in a way nobody could heal. Richard looked her straight in the eye, standing there against the backdrop of the burning city, like some beautiful demon, and said nothing. Then she raged at him and accused him of being heartless. He had the strangest look in his eyes. Then he told her John Drayton killed himself. She believed him. Richard didn't lie. And then he'd asked her if she thought he was a monster. She wanted to tell him then. She wanted to explain the rush of gratitude she felt when he offered her his arm on the bow of the brigantine. She wanted to tell him that she admired him for making a stand, and that she wished she could have met him before all this happened, before she had thrown her life away. Then Jason's crew boarded the ship, and she had nearly fainted like some weak-nerved fool. Her legs refused to support her, and she went down like a cloth doll. Somehow she had gone the entire 32 years of her life without fainting once, and now she had managed to almost do it twice in a day. It had to be some sort of record. So shameful. Some partner she turned out to be. It's a wonder she didn't die of sheer embarrassment. Richard had come to her rescue. She remembered his scent as he wrapped his arm around her, the smell of sweat and smoke and sandalwood, a rich, smooth, earthy, powerful redolence that took her to places she had no business going. She had said something in her addled state she couldn't remember. "Where are the boys?" "In front," he said. "They insisted on driving." "And the dog?" "He's with them. You will have to name him at some point." "Where are we?" "Half an hour from Camarine Manor." Richard was still watching her with that warm look in his eyes. "We're almost there." "Already?" "It's late afternoon," he said. "We left Kalena at dawn and rode nonstop through the day." "Do you still have the ledgers?" He reached into a bag lying by his feet and pulled out an edge of the small, red leather book. It slowly dawned on her then. The horrors of last night were over, and she could let them fade from her as if it were all a terrible nightmare. They had their proof. They would take it to the Marshal of the Southern Provinces, and the slave trade would be no more. She'd been too spent and traumatized to recognize it last night, but now she finally understood. They had won. She looked at Richard. "We won." "We did." He smiled. It was a genuine, beautiful smile that pulled her as if she were a speck of iron and he a powerful magnet, its lure so sudden and strong. She pressed her back deeper against the carriage seat. She had kissed him last night before passing out. She was almost sure of it. "Are you all right, my lady?" he asked. That "my lady" slid over her soul like soft velvet over skin. "Fine, thank you." She waited, but he said nothing more. He made no move toward her. He was probably letting her collect her wits. She thought he wanted her, but maybe she had read too much into a look. Maybe there was no mutual attraction. Charlotte searched her memory, trying to scrounge up some definitive evidence that he was drawn to her. She could find none. She thought she heard something in his voice or saw something in his eyes, but she barely knew him. They'd been together for a mere 2 days. She could have been mistaken. She had thrown away everything she was taught and willingly walked into hell, where she had murdered countless people. It filled her with self-loathing. She hated what she'd become, and she wanted reassurance that she still deserved to be loved. It was coloring her judgment. Richard had made it clear where his priorities lay. True, he always addressed her with complete courtesy and tried to protect her from harm, but she was a useful tool. Any man with exposure to the weird's customs would afford her that courtesy, because she was a blue blood and a woman. She had to stop deluding herself. She had let her fantasies carry her away once, and she was now perfectly aware of the monsters and heartbreak that lay in wait on that path. She'd made a fool of herself already. If he had any tact, and Richard had tact in spades, he wouldn't mention it. She summoned whatever poise she could muster. "How's your wound?"
"Better. It's so kind of you to ask, my lady."
And why in the world did his "my lady" sound like an endearment to her ears? Charlotte scanned his injury. It was regenerating well, but a budding infection promised to blossom into a serious problem. "I'll need to heal you when we stop."
"Why not now?"
He touched the curve of the seat next to him. She blinked. He was sprawled on the seat, tall, handsome, dangerous, and he was smiling. It was a wicked smile, inviting, no, seductive, as if he was promising her that if she sat next to